Welcome to Groupies, a little video series where I recap all of the shenanigans that happen in the G5 world of college football because, okay, you get the gist of this already. Let's just say that a lot has happened since we last spoke. It's clear who are going to be the contenders in their respective conferences, and there are very few teams to choose from when it comes to the 12-team playoff, and they are not making it easy to send one of them there. This is really the week where it's time for the contenders to really shine, and in that note, there are a couple of games here that proved crucial for the respective races. The weekday games for this week were a doozy, and there is no better start than the wagon wheel between Kent State and Akron. This is really a game for Kent State to win. They have all the momentum on their side and are fighting to stay alive in the postseason, along with trying to get the wagon wheel back after 2 years. Let's just say the underrated rivalry delivered once again. It starts off with Akron scoring a field goal, but Kent State takes the lead quickly afterwards. It's a bit of back and forth in the first half that actually goes to weigh in the favor of Akron. Afterwards though, the Shields and the Kent State offense explodes, jumping to an 18-point lead in the fourth with around a 98% chance to win the game. But Akron wasn't done yet. Marcel Williams, who would end up having over 200 rushing yards for the team, helped Akron get back into it, and by the time it was the fourth quarter, it was 35-all. After having 18 unanswered points scored on them, Kent State had the ball first, and let's just say that they made quick work on that drive. When it was Akron's turn, Kent State, whose production on tackling was actually really good this game, was able to get a negative play out of them, but then gave up 10 yards. On a fairly manageable 3rd and 4, Ben Finley could not find a receiver. One more incompletion later, and they turned the ball over, meaning Kent State has taken back the wagon wheel for the first time since 2022. Safe to say the rebuild has been going really well at Kent State. It will be really tough, but it's possible for Kent State to somehow make a bowl this season. The other game on Tuesday is also a action game with Ohio versus Western Michigan. Western Michigan, after starting 0-3, has been a fun surprise. This time they're going against their fellow MAC contender Ohio. In a low-scoring affair, production was both rare and sloppy. The first half wasn't the best for both teams, but Western Michigan certainly suffered more. Ohio started off with an interception, but Western Michigan dealt with both a missed field goal and a turnover on downs. When the second half started, it took 5 minutes for Western Michigan to get all the way down the field for a touchdown, giving them the lead. But Ohio would just run the clock down afterwards. Combined with Western Michigan defense giving them a hard time, it was not a good day for Parker Navarro to be throwing the ball. The 10-minute drive would pay off in the fourth, but Western Michigan quickly responded. The rest of the quarter was a complete mess. It started with a punt, and then Western Michigan took 7.5 minutes off only to miss a field goal. When Ohio State was down on their luck, they turned it over on downs, losing 10 yards in the process and only taking a minute off. This practically gave the Broncos the game with them being at their own 10, but they somehow didn't do anything with that, and Ohio was still in some sort of contention. Granted, it was 16 seconds left, but we've seen crazier things happen before. Unfortunately, a miracle did not happen for them this time, and they fall to 4-2. Western Michigan now stands alone at the top of the MAC standings. They've always been a contender in this conference this season, and they likely will stay that way. They also earned bowl eligibility that week too. The reason for Western Michigan standing alone at the top has to come from a Wednesday game with Buffalo falling to Central Michigan. It's been kind of a weird season for both of these teams, and as for Buffalo, this is the first time they convincingly lost to a G5 team. You would think that they would have a better record, but with some of the play calling and just some unlucky moments, it's prevented them from moving up further than they have. In this game, Central Michigan was defense heavy in the first half, scoring an interception return touchdown and only holding Buffalo to 3 points until the very end of the second. It wasn't exactly a clean second half either, but they were able to take as many points as possible, while Buffalo just seemed down on their luck. They turned the ball over 5 times that day despite showing to be pretty productive offensively. Central Michigan quarterback Joe Labas had one of his best games of the season, with 247 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. allowing Central Michigan to come out with a 38-19 victory and bowl eligibility. It only gets crazier too because Miami, Ohio also gets knocked off on this day, this time by Toledo. It was kind of tough to pinpoint how the Rockets would do when it came to conference play, but they really came into their own in the past couple weeks. The Toledo defense made it tough for Miami, Ohio all day, holding them to less than 250 total yards and having 3 interceptions. They didn't do good on the offense either, but it was enough for them to score multiple touchdowns and get a clear victory. Now also bowl eligible, they knock off Miami and demote them to a 4-2 record in conference, leading to one of the tightest conference races in the country, with 5 teams tied at 4-2. It's going to be really interesting to see where it goes from there, as a lot of these teams do play each other. So, only a matter of time until we find out who gets that second spot. If Western Michigan can hold on, of course. Now, with that out of the way, it's time for the good stuff. Going into this week, there were 7 teams remaining in contention, and 2 of them happened to play each other. In the American, no less. And those 2 teams could not be anything other than number 24 ranked South Florida and Navy could not be any more of a showdown. 2 teams on the ropes in terms of making the playoffs, and one of them has to get eliminated. It starts off with a USF punt, followed by a Navy touchdown. USF responds with a field goal, but then Navy fumbles the ball. USF is not able to do anything with that drive, and Navy scores another touchdown. Immediately, it's not looking good for South Florida. Things started to go even more wrong for them in the second quarter, as even though they get a touchdown on their first drive, they're suffering from turnovers while Navy is doing everything they can to score. It's at this point that Byron Brown has to carry his team. It's all or nothing. South Florida does manage to pull themselves together in the second half, but can only manage 1 touchdown in the third. Navy's strat is to now start running down the clock, which does work until they're penalized 15 yards when USF gets the ball back, and then a 60-yard touchdown run happens. It's Byron Brown's 3rd touchdown on the day, and at that point Navy kicks it into high gear, going back and forth with touchdowns between the 2 teams. Because Navy does have the advantage though with a 3-point lead, even though they are unable to get anything going on their last drive, they still come out of this game with a victory. South Florida, a team with so much hype built around it the entire season and the highest ranked G5 team at the time, is now eliminated. Navy, who took a hard loss to Notre Dame last week, now got a massive win on their resume and will stay at the top of the American for the time being. Both teams would produce over 500 offensive yards each, but because of South Florida's slow start at the beginning, the deficit was simply too much to overcome. The cannibalization of the American continues. It's chaotic, it's frustrating, it's inevitable, but it's really fun to watch. Speaking of the American, however, yeah, North Texas versus UAB was not gonna be close. This is North Texas's first real opportunity to show themselves in a very long time. Mestamaker wasted no time showing off his skills against UAB, and as for the freshman Caleb Hawkins, the running back would score 5 touchdowns on the day. The North Texas defense would allow 4 turnovers, all in the first half, and they would start off the game with 5 consecutive scoring drives. It's another record-setter day for the Mean Green, as they trample the Blazers 53-24, moving up to 9-1. The program has now started 9-1 for the first time since 1959, and as of right now, they are in the driver's seat to make the American Championship. Only time will tell if they can hold on in their last 2 games, as both of them are trapped games ahead. It is a great season to be a North Texas fan, and it will be fun to see how they end the season off. Here's a reminder that a Conference USA's team is still technically alive in the race to make the playoffs. The 7-2 Western Kentucky Hilltoppers is taking on Middle Tennessee, and it is a cakewalk for them. It has not been the most ideal circumstances for Western Kentucky, but their offense is still productive as ever. 642 yards, but don't let the final score fool you. Middle Tennessee was not making it easy for them. After a slow start, Middle Tennessee was keeping them in check for the majority of the game, and they rallied back in the third. After a missed field goal by the Hilltoppers, it seemed like the opportunity for Middle Tennessee to take the lead, but they got stopped early and had to punt. Western Kentucky would score next, and that seemed like the final nail in the coffin. Western Kentucky used their running backs pretty well, with Lavelle Wright in particular having 2 touchdowns. And even with the chaos that is Conference USA, they are still a contender for the championship. With their final conference game against Jacksonville State coming in 2 weeks, it is a game that they absolutely need to win, not only for their conference championship hopes, but potentially their playoff hopes as well. Speaking of teams in playoff contention, James Madison is a team that could easily steal the G5 bid from everyone. They are 8-1 and undefeated in conference going into this game, but it's against an Appalachian State team that has won the last 2 meetings. Meanwhile, it has been a very rough year for the Mountaineers. But if there's a team that they're going to try their very hardest to beat them, it's going to be James Madison. In the end, however, Appalachian State got slaughtered by the James Madison Dukes. Both teams had their only turnovers at the beginning of the game, but afterwards it wasn't even a contest. The James Madison defense is one of the best in the nation, and they were holding Appalachian State to consistent 3-and-outs, and by the end of the first half they only had 2 first downs. Meanwhile, James Madison was scoring up on them, being up 30-0 by halftime, and at the end of the game making them surrender over 600 yards of offense. James Madison has now beaten the Mountaineers when it matters most, and with a decent loss to Louisville, they look in prime contention for the Sun Belt and the G5 race if things continue to swing their way. They have a game against Washington State next, and if they can survive that, then they are just 2 victories away from potentially securing the G5 bid. Well, I am bringing this game up for one reason. First of all, Memphis is eliminated from playoff contention. I'll get to that later. But they're still in the hunt for the American, right? Well, East Carolina, who was eliminated fairly early in the season, was going to be a big game for Memphis. All hope is lost for them making the playoffs, but there's still a chance that they could make their conference championship. It starts off with going East Carolina's way, but Memphis is able to tie it up in the second quarter. It wouldn't be long until Memphis outright takes the lead and is trying to defend it from East Carolina. Eventually, the Pirates do tie it up in the third quarter, but it's still anybody's game, now sitting at 24-all. At this point, the rapid scoring has pretty much stopped, and it's now basically 3-and-outs. Then things get interesting. After a 59-yard drive in 6.5 minutes, they elected to not go for a field goal. Even though they need to run down the clock, they elect to go for a couple of passes before trying to run it in at the 4th. The 4th-and-1 conversion fails, which means East Carolina gets it back, but they do absolutely nothing with it and fumbles at their own 28. Memphis, having their second chance, goes for the field goal this time, but East Carolina, with around 2 minutes left to go, decide to not play around, completing a 31-yard touchdown pass from Caton Hauser to Peyton Mangrum. This was just one of many big plays that they gave up that day, but it was the most crucial. With about a minute to go and a touchdown, it was pretty much game over for them. Suffering a 31-27 defeat and now on a 2-game skid, now completely out of the American Championship race. East Carolina has been an underrated team since their out-of-conference schedule. Caton Hauser went 23 for 34 for 1 touchdown and over 330 yards. The receiving core for East Carolina was what really was the brutal weapon for them, and it also helps that their defense was able to get more tackles for loss. Now sitting at 5-1 with 2 games left to go, they're kind of a toss-up for the American Championship. But if the teams above them can fall, all of which who are still in contention for playoffs, then it would be a massive surprise for everyone to see them make it in, as it would be their first conference championship appearance since 2009. Continuing in the American, Tulane is also a competitor for the playoffs, but they have to go past first Florida Atlantic. Admittedly, it was a fairly competitive first half, but when FIU's first drive started off with an interception, it was not going to play out well. Both teams did eventually start scoring, but by the end of the first half, FIU already had 3 turnovers. From that point onwards, Tulane was able to keep the lead around that size. While FIU was able to get a lot more yards in than Tulane, it just helps that Tulane used a lot more of their players efficiently, which is the real reason why they won this game. It is a good win overall, but 8-2 is not exactly the most impressive record, I think. But this victory means that they are still in the hunt for the American Championship. an absolute requirement to make it if they wish to go to the 12-team playoff. Liberty and FIU was a mess for sure. Alright, so here's how this went. The first quarter saw them tied at 7-all, but Liberty was able to get the hand up in the second quarter. Both quarterbacks were absolutely balling out, but it was going the way of Liberty by the time of the second half. Only one scoring drive would happen in the third quarter, an FIU touchdown that would put them in the lead. And with the pressure on their hands, even Vasco began to slip. An interception early in the fourth did not lead to any scoring by FIU. Liberty got the ball back after a punt, and they were only able to muster up a field goal. With a little less than 3 minutes left, FIU had the ball and was in prime position to win this game. They eventually got all the way to the Liberty 40, but on a 4th and 1, they could not convert on the run. Somehow, with the little time remaining, Liberty was able to tie up the game. FIU was the team that got the ball first, and with an 18-yard pass by Spasanki, they were able to get it in for a touchdown. When it was Liberty's turn, they were making great progress, but they got stopped less than 10 yards away from the end zone. On a crucial 4th and 6, even Vasco had nowhere to go but to throw it, which landed right into an FIU receiver's hands, giving FIU a coveted 5th win for them and their best result so far this decade. Liberty is now on the ropes and in danger of having a losing record for the first time since 2005. In what is potentially their worst season since moving up to FBS, they have to take down Louisiana Tech and Kennesaw State in order to have a chance of making a bowl game. If you liked 1 overtime, how about 2 overtimes? Because that is exactly what has happened between Utah State and UNLV. There really isn't much to play for nationally for UNLV, but in terms of making the Mountain West Championship, by some miracle, this is a pretty big game. UNLV was the first team to score, but Utah State quickly got away from them, going up 13-3. UNLV would respond with a touchdown next, but it was very clear that the Rebels were going to have some problems. In fair play, Calandria and the receiving corps is what kept UNLV in this game, and their efforts would pay off when they finally took the lead in the third, but afterwards it was a back and forth battle that eventually went into overtime. Why were the overtimes in this game so weird? It was the missed field goals. The only reason both teams were here in the first place was because Utah State missed a game-winning field goal to end off the fourth. Afterwards, UNLV missed a field goal, and then Utah State missed a field goal, their offense barely moving. After 3 consecutive missed field goals, Utah State would finally shoot one in. This was a bit of a problem for UNLV, as they had not been able to get the offense moving the entire overtime period. But there was a somewhat unsung hero. Caden McGee would run it in all 25 yards in for his first touchdown of the day, and it was one that sealed Utah State's fate. UNLV has gotten by this season with a lot of miracles, but each of them have been very crucial to get where they are today. Now, how many more are they going to need in order to make the Mountain West Championship, or has that luck already ran out for them? This team is certainly great, but you can't hide all of its flaws forever. Speaking of conference championship races, there is a crucial one in Conference USA. Undefeated Kennesaw State versus undefeated Jacksonville State. 2 of the more recent teams to move up to FBS, and they have clearly shown their worth. These were 2 top teams that were fighting for the very top of the Conference USA standings, and they certainly played like 2 top teams. It started off with a back and forth for about a quarter and a half. But Jacksonville State, to end the first half, would have had one of the most insane touchdown sequences all season. After being held back a total of 15 yards, they had really nothing to do but to just Hail Mary it. Gavin Wimsatt would heave it into the air to hit DeAndre Johnson, who was surrounded by Kennesaw State defenders. But somehow, the ball bounced and it would land up in his hands, and he would go all the way to the end zone. On top of that, Cade Cunningham would also make the 2-point conversion, giving the Gamecocks a definitive 12-point lead over Kennesaw State. After a play like that, it was going to be something that was going to be sitting in both teams' mind, and Kennesaw State never really recovered after that. They did get a field goal in the third, but Jacksonville State did too. And after an interception early in the fourth, it seemed like Jacksonville State has the conference locked up. With a victory of 35-26 over a conference breakout team, they look very poised to go back to the Conference USA Championship and maybe even defend their conference title. It was a rough game for Kennesaw State, but there are still plenty of ways that they could still make the conference championship game. Finally, last but not least, we had a crazy Saturday off stay in the Mountain West with Boise State and San Diego State. Let's just start off this game in the second quarter because literally nothing happened. San Diego State would finally put a team on the board with a touchdown, but Boise State was able to respond in around twice the amount of time. After another big score, San Diego State would lead at the half. What followed was another quarter of just punts before San Diego State would finally have a field goal early in the fourth. This would be the last time anyone would ever score. And a missed field goal by Boise State would only add insult to injury that night, as despite the Boise State QB cut forth doing their very best, they could not out-offense Lucky Sutton. The only touchdown scores would actually come from both teams' running backs, with Jaden Denigals giving the Aztecs 2 touchdowns and Dylan Riley giving Boise State their only score. It's a down year for Boise State. But as for San Diego State, it's definitely one of their bigger high points this decade. In the hunt for their first conference championship berth since 2021, and potentially their first conference championship outright since 2016, they look to be in a very good position, and while technically not eliminated from the playoffs yet, if absolutely everything can go their way, they might be the ones that find themselves in a 12-team playoff. With that concludes the game recap for week 12 of this little series. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Let's get into all of the eliminations and then the standings. From the last time I did this, we were down to just 10 competitors, but that number has now shrunk to 6, with one team getting eliminated this week. Hawaii and UNLV were eliminated in week 10, while Memphis was eliminated in week 11. This time though, after all the hype, it will be number 24 ranked South Florida getting the boot. Don't get it wrong, this team is obviously really tough, especially when they started the season with 2 ranked wins, but they simply could not win close games against the top of the American. They were bested by Memphis, who would end up getting eliminated afterwards, and Navy, a team that is still in the hunt for the American Championship in the playoffs. Speaking of Navy, out of the 6 remaining competitors, they would be the only team safe from this week. The rest of these teams either have 2 losses or already playing conference championship games where they would be guaranteed a second conference loss. This is a very big week for the teams that are still in contention, especially in the American, which has been cannibalizing stuff its past couple weeks. Who will come out of this week unscathed is really anybody's guess. Despite the unintentional cannibalism, the American still has the most teams in the bid for the G5 with Navy, Tulane, and North Texas. They all have 1 loss in conference, and since none of them play each other for the rest of this time, it's going to be interesting to see who makes that game. Jacksonville State stands alone on the top of the Conference USA standings with Western Kentucky and Kennesaw State right behind them. The 2 contenders though do not play each other, so it will go down to overall record against common opponents to see who gets that second bid if Jacksonville State assumingly wins the rest of their games. The MAC is still a mess with Miami, Ohio leading the charge, and then a 3-5 way tie for second place. Safe to say there are still a lot of consequential games to be played out in this conference, and really it's going to be hard for anyone to defend their title or contend for it. With a lot of teams just reaching bowl bids or slowly approaching towards it, it's still going to be a toss-up to see who ends up winning the Mid-American. San Diego State is on the ropes for the last Mountain West team that could make the 12-team playoffs, but they're sitting comfortably at 5-1. Again, we have a massive tie for second place with around 5 teams participating, ranging from conference title defender Boise State all the way to Hawaii. While they might not be garnering national attention as some might have expected, they're in a league of their own, ready to give the conference a good shakeup before a massive change in the offseason. UConn right now is at a quite comfortable 8-3, Washington State can still make a bowl bid, and Oregon State still has one more chance to pull out a win for what was otherwise a disappointing season. The Sunbelt West still has some games to be played to determine who will be the one to go to the Sunbelt Championship, but Southern Miss seems to be the favorable one here. But of course, Arkansas State and Troy could still somehow find their way in, but it's going to be a lot of work for them. As for the Sunbelt East, we have the potential G5 bid stealer James Madison, who has an undefeated record in conference. With 1 game to go, it is very favorable for them to win out. And to my knowledge, they are one of, if not the first G5 team to have their bid locked down for their own conference championship. As for bowl bids this week, it is only just MAC teams with Western Michigan, Central Michigan, and Toledo getting the call. As of now, there are 21 G5 teams left that can still make the postseason. Tulane is one of those contenders, and according to the college football playoff rankings, they are the only G5 team to be ranked right now, sitting at number 24. I am not going to go into my opinion of that, but considering both the AP and coaches poll have James Madison and North Texas, it really is a closer race than the committee might think. As for Team of the Week, this is not going to be a hard one. It is going to be Navy, who takes out the ranked South Florida, ending their conference championship and playoff hopes. Really, anybody that is still in contention that won their game this week could be put here. But out of all the wins that happened this week, that one just happens to be the most impactful. And that will do it for Week 12. With around 2 weeks left in the regular season to finish everything off, we still have the conference championship, and eventually we'll figure out who actually gets that G5 spot. Look out for the 6 teams still remaining, especially if they're in the American. With our final 6 teams, thank you all for watching, everybody, and I will see you all next week.